Hello and welcome to Ranlif Plays. Today I quickly just want to go over the graphical settings that I use in Rainbow Six Siege, only because I find that with a game like this, a competitive game, sometimes running at the absolute highest settings you can isn't always the best option. Sometimes lowering things to get a competitive edge, whether it actually be because of getting a higher frame rate or just being able to see enemies easier, can be really advantageous. And sometimes when you're like, oh, that's total bullshit, how did someone see me? It's probably because they had different settings than you, which allowed them to see you a bit easier. So I'm just going to run through these quickly, kind of tell you what each one does, and in the end it's up to you what you're willing to give up graphical fidelity wise. So first we're going to look at the display screen here. I have two monitors, so you can pick your monitor. Resolution, I can go up to 1440p. I have a 1440p monitor, but I'm running the game at 1080, and the reason for that is the refresh rate. So this game being a competitive shooter, I would love to be able to run the game at 1440p and at 144 frames per second, but sadly my 290X just can't output that. So I gave up the resolution a bit, which, I mean, 1080 still isn't horrible, but 1440p does look a lot better. But I gave up the resolution a bit to knock up the frame rate here. So most people only have a 60 hertz monitor, but you want to make sure then that you can run at a locked 60 hertz. I'm running, here at 144, but sometimes I can drop as low as about 100, but at that range, and I have a FreeSync monitor, you don't notice it as much. Aspect ratio you can leave on auto. Most people are going to have 16:9. If you have an ultra wide, you're going to have 21:9, but should be fine auto. VSync, here's a big one. You want to try and lock your game at 60 frames a second, but if you're able to stay above 60 frames, you're not dropping below 60 frames, and you have a 60 frames monitor. This is different. Just pretend I'm saying 120 if you have a 120 frame rate monitor, etc., then you want to keep it off. Why? Because the way VSync works is it's for a split second going to hold back frames to make sure that it's giving you exactly 60 and not over, to avoid screen tearing. Well, screen tearing is bad too. It can screw up your game as well. But by holding back those frames, what it's doing is for a split second, you're not getting the most current information. So sometimes someone comes around a corner, headshots you right away, you didn't even see him. Could be because VSync's on. But you got to balance that. If you're getting a lot of screen tearing that's screwing up your game, maybe turning on, you can bump it up there. You have 1 frame or 2 frame. 1 frame should probably be fine. That's going to run it at your monitor's refresh rate. But play with it. As I said, for me, I keep it off because I have a FreeSync monitor, which means that my monitor, instead of running at a consistent 144 frames, because that's what it's at, it will adapt its refresh rate to however many frames my graphics card's putting out. So I don't have that problem. You can also look into getting a FreeSync or G-Sync, depending if you have an NVIDIA card monitor, if that's something that you're having problems with. You don't want widescreen letterbox. You don't need to have the black bars. That's just removing more screen real estate. Field of view, that's more of a personal decision. I keep mine at 80. Just so you know, the higher you go, it kind of applies a bit of a fisheye effect, so it could distort things, but it also means you're rendering more things. So it can have the higher you put it, which does give you a bigger field of view, you'll be able to see more, but it could negatively impact the performance, and you want to have at least that locked 60 and above it if you have a better monitor. Alright, so let's go into the graphical settings, and I have a pretty good PC. Like, I'm not saying it's, the crazy top of the line, but it's definitely a high-end gaming PC. And as you'll see, most of my settings here are not, kicking the crap out of this game. I could, but one, it would affect my frame rate, and I want to be over 60, but also a lot of this game's lighting effects can really screw with your ability to see, especially if you're trying to peek inside from outside, outside from inside, especially outside from inside when the map is during daytime and you got so much bloom. So this is kind of going to fix some of that. Texture quality I have on very high. They did release an ultra pack, But as you can see down here in the right corner, I'm getting close to using up all my video memory, and there's been a couple times where I've been at like 3,900-ish, and if you don't want to go over, it's really going to start causing problems. So I just have it on very high, and really, Ultra is only going to make a difference if you're running at 1440p or 4K. If you're running the game at that, awesome. I'm sure the game looks great, but then you probably have a video card that's going to have more than 4 gigabytes of VRAM, so you're fine. Anti-tropic filtering, that's pretty much up to you. It is going to make shadows and lighting effects that come off objects look a bit better. It's a filtering effect. I have mine on 2. Most games I'll run at 8 or 16, but again, I wanted to push as many frames as possible, so lowering it gave me a couple more frames here or there. With it on at least 2, you at least kind of get the difference. You can see a bit of a difference. Sorry, LOD quality. This one, as it says, it's going to adjust the distance of lower level of mesh details are used. It means in the distance, if you're looking far out in the distance, it's not going to render things as nicely as if you're right next to it. So I have mine on low, and that's because if you are looking into the distance, it'll still render people, your enemies or your allies, at full quality, but it's going to render the backgrounds at kind of a lower quality, and it really will make your enemies stand out more. So especially if you're sniping or anything, it's kind of nice to have that advantage. Shading quality, same kind of thing. It's going to give you a bit of a competitive advantage because you're not going to have as many shadows that are being cast onto people. So if people are trying to hide in the shadows, you're going to see them a lot easier. Again, good if you're trying to look far down a hallway, or especially if you're looking from outside to inside, it can help a lot. Shadow quality, that's a bit of personal preference, and I have mine on medium because if you turn it up too high, then I was having frame rate dips. But also with your shading quality at low, you're not going to have that many shadows anyways, so it doesn't really matter. Reflection quality, this is a big one. When you're looking in through windows, through glass, especially looking through skylights, or sometimes you'll look through car windows, if you have reflections on high, you're just going to end up seeing yourself or the background. If you turn it down on low, you can pretty easily just see right through them. Very important for skylights. It's a night and day difference. You should definitely have this on low. Ambient Occlusion is lighting effects, kind of like God rays, if you've ever seen those in games. I mean, a lot of games use them now. You definitely want to have this off because it'll also affect bloom. So if you're trying to look from inside to outside, somebody's trying to window peek you, you don't want to have just, the God rays coming through and just blinding your vision. You're still going to have some of it. Even with it off, looking outside still isn't the easiest thing in the world, but it'll make it a lot smoother for you. Definitely recommend you have it off. Lens effects, that's directly bloom and lens flare. Definitely want to have it off. I mean, I hate lens flare in video games in general, but this is definitely going to make looking outside a hell of a lot easier for you. Zoom, depth of field, that's totally personal preference. It'll make it so when you aim down sight, you'll have kind of a blurring effect that'll happen on anything you're not looking at in your scope. I like it because it kind of makes it so you can focus on exactly what's in your line of sight there in your scope. Other people, hate it. Again, totally personal preference. Post-processing, anti-aliasing, this is an important one. So any kind of post-processing effect, what it does is your graphics card renders the frame, and then for a split second, it's going to then add the post-processing effect onto it. So anti-aliasing, what it does is removes the jagged edges on things. Usually you want some level of anti-aliasing on if you're at 1080 or everything is going to look kind of jaggedy. But with this, because it's a post-processing effect, what happens is it, again, holds that frame for a split second, and sometimes half a second is all the advantage you need in this game if you're popping around a corner or you're going to window peek or anything like that. So you don't want your frames to be held for any longer than they have to. You want them there instantly. Same thing with the multi-sample anti-aliasing. It, again, is going to hold it back. I mean, it even technically has MSAA down here. Temporal filtering reading the little chart wrong there, as below off, saying that it actually is less of an impact than off is, but still anti-aliasing is going to hold back your frame. So does the game look worse with these settings? Yes, it does. And again, you're going to have to balance how much of a competitive advantage you want with what you want to look at. It still looks like a 2015 AAA release. Don't get me wrong on that. It's not going to all of a sudden look like Minecraft. But still, you have to balance competitive advantage with how much graphical fidelity you really need to feel comfortable. So I said, I'm definitely on the lower end. Like, I want every piece of advantage that I can get. I want that high frame rate on a high frame rate monitor. I don't want any of my frames to be held back. I don't want shading. I don't want the lighting effects. You know, I want to be able to see someone very clearly. And especially with the shading and lighting effects, like, you will notice a big difference. And the reflection quality. You'll notice a big difference right when you turn them on, of how easy it is to see people at a distance and how easy it is to see people looking, if you're looking outside or now looking inside, compared to someone who might have all the effects on. So anyways, I hope that helps. I hope it gives you a nice competitive advantage. Let me know if you found out any graphical settings or any other ways to get a slight advantage. I'd love to hear them. And keep on gaming.